Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. That's the face I make when I'm reading a really, really good book. Today's book is a really, really good book. We're talking about SHAMBHALA, The Sacred Path of the Warrior. My version of this book is pretty worn out. As you can see, I have taken this thing across the world. This is in my top 3 favorite books of all time. So here you are. You're learning about a book that I sincerely love, and we are on The Obscure Book Report. My name is Knial Piper, and I am a writer myself. I write obscure books. Actually, my first book was called Freedom, Blues, and American Soul. This is a strange, very obscure book about a boy who's picked up by Satan, Lucifer himself, and he goes on a wild journey, venturing out into the wilder parts of Florida on his way to Key West, and he witnesses very strange deaths of individuals who had sold their soul for fame, glory, beauty, and now Satan's here, and it's time to pay the devil his due. That's an awesome book. You can find that on Amazon. You can find that in Books A Million. You can find that at Barnes & Noble. You can find that anywhere books are sold. I think it even sells for about $2 on eBay. So go check it out. Have a fun read. But currently I'm working on a new book, The Demonic Virtue. And we actually produce an audiobook, chapter by chapter, every week after this show. We'll probably post it around midnight tonight. And we're on chapter 8. You can find all the series before that on YouTube and Herald Broadcasting Services. Herald Broadcasting Services makes all of this possible. And we, on the Obscure Book Report, were lucky enough to get transferred because of the success of this show and because of you, the fan and the viewer, your support. We have been transferred to Herald Broadcasting Services, the website. We're moving up. We're moving on to better places. And we have you to thank. If you want to call in and you want to give us your thoughts about the show, books that you want us to review, maybe what's your favorite book? Do you have a Shambhala type book you want us to read? Do you have comments on shows, on segments of this? There's 4 segments to this show, The Obscure Book Report. If you want to say anything, that number is 321-405-2476. Hear your voice on camera. Call in. All right. Shambhala. First, we have to start out with saying, Shambhala. Everything has a basic goodness to it. I learned so much by this book. But, I learned a lot of really fascinating things about studying what happened behind this book. This is Tibetan Buddhism. What is Tibetan Buddhism? Well, first we must understand where is Tibet? Tibet is it's a country region area in the Himalayas within China, and there's a lot of dispute over its land, so it's hard to say, it's a formal country. Some countries recognize it, some don't. There's even debate as whether the United States recognizes it right now with the whole dealings of Trump. But in 1913, it gained its independence. The area originally came up to be in the 7th century, and the Chinese Republic did not recognize its independence. Actually, they had the Battle of Chomondo. I think I say that right? Yeah, Chomondo. And that happened in 1951, and initially, Tibet didn't do too well. They're kind of a peaceful people, and they don't do too well in battle. So they lost, and in 1959, their independence was abolished. Generally, this is a whole different kind of area. The activists for this were exiled, like the Dalai Lama, and tortured, captured, and killed. But the way they live over there is just different than China. We had the Red Revolution, and most of the old stuff was just done away with. Chairman Mao said, "Get that shit out of here." Well, the Tibetan people kept a lot of that stuff. They still eat yak. They still drink butter tea. They eat barley. And they celebrate art, music, festivals, and culture based around Indian Buddhism. That's where it originally came from. What is Tibetan Buddhism? It is one of 2 major religions in Tibet. They also have the Bon religion, but Tibetan Buddhism rules pretty primary in Tibet. Like I said, it's derived from Indian Buddhism, and it generally is deity yoga and tantric practices centered around aspiring to Buddhahood or getting to that rainbow body. If you ever heard of the rainbow body, like the chakras. There are 4 major schools of thought within Tibetan Buddhism. Those include 4 things that I can't pronounce, but I'm going to do it so you can make fun of me. The Nangyingma, the Kagyu, the Sakyu, and the Gilug. Yeah, I just butchered those. But the Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lama are two of the primary figures in this. And of course, the author of this book, who kinda is centralized around Shambhala. What is Shambhala? Where did Shambhala come from? Well, Shambhala is known as this mythical kingdom. And you can see here in this picture that it's formulated after the eight-petaled lotus. And it's supposed to look like that. In the center is Kalpa, who is ruled over by Kalki, the ruler of this supposed real city. There's a lot of debate about it being real or not. It's called the Pure Land, and some believe it just to be a celestial realm. And the Zangzu text of Tibet, they call a lot of songs and culture centered around Shang. Vishnu is supposedly the one that rules over Shangri-La or Shambhala. And this city is just like, it is the ideal city. Its leaders were wise, its leaders were kind, the people all aspired to the same thing, and people just got along. It was a good city. But it's something, generally it's believed Sutra. He was the ruler of the time in 1959 BC, and there's a picture of him there. So he ruled over this Menchenla religious people. And this is before Shambhala, and there were two types of people. There were the sun worshippers, and then there were the wheel time worshippers. And well, Vimula Kirti Sutra took all of the sun worshippers and said, wheel time of thought. That's the only thing, the wheel of time, that's it. Get out of here, sun worshippers. Well, they went on to say, we want to remain true to our sun chariot. We do not wish to give up our belief system to change to another. So he realized maybe he made a mistake by kicking them out, but it was too late. The sun people got together, and under their banner of the sun, they created Shambhala, this ideal city. And that's where it originally came from. The first leader, his name was another name I can't pronounce, but I'm going to try, Vanjujavartakirti, aided the preaching of the Kalchakra teaching, and he passed the throne in 59 BC to his son, who became a Buddhist saint, or he became a Buddhist saint after he passed it to his son and died. He is said to supposed to come back in the future, and based on the Kalchakra text, they believe this number might be 2424, when we'll see the golden Buddha come back and usher in the golden age. So, to people that are reading, listening to this in 2424, get ready. Shit's about to get real. But people that went searching for this include the Soviets. They were trying to figure out a way to make communism like more supreme. Got together a search party, and they never actually like went on an expedition, but they tried to find Shambhala. It's supposedly like they lay out a pretty common area where it might be, but it's also not very, it's very general. By the crooked river between the mountains, and people are all like, well, what mountain could this be and what river could this be? But Nicholas and Helena Roerich, who actually turned out to be a Nobel Prize winner in the early 1920s, between 1924 and 1928, those two, they went out for 4 years trying to find this place, unsuccessfully, may I say. Modern time, we're talking about Alexander David Knial. He published kind of a thought about this place. It was one of the first times where he's saying this isn't an actual place. Stop looking for it. It's an idea, or it's a temple where this idea was born. And that's got somebody else thinking. This got Samuel Burschultz thinking in 1968, and he created Shambhala Booksellers. This later on became Shambhala Publications in 1969, under which the guise of this book was written. All right, our author today, fascinating man, call him Chögyam Trungpa. That's him. As a young man, he is a fascinating dude. He created the term crazy wisdom, also known as divine madness of Shambhala. And it is like an independent basis in human wisdom that does not belong to the East or West, but he says that there's just a basic goodness within all of us. And, his son later took over this in the 2000s and called this publication series the Shambhala International. And it is the #1 publisher of Buddhist text in the world. But in 1939, Nangchen Kham in Central Asia was born, and his lineage is what is passed down as Trungpa, or Trungpa, this man we're talking about here who wrote this phenomenal book. Well, he was one of these people that got exiled whenever the Chinese People Liberation Army said, get the fuck out. And he tried to do that. He went out into the mountains, and he lived in the mountains for like 2 months in a cabin in the blizzard and nearly died. Somewhere in the process of this, he gathered 300 other refugees, and they tried to escape China. In the process of escaping Tibet, China, to get to India, they had to cross a river, a frozen river, may I say, under heavy gunfire by the Chinese Liberation Army. 250 of those 300 people died. Chögyam Trungpa was one of those lucky survivors. He got to cross on, and those less than 50 refugees who had escaped the Chinese Liberation Army were still being chased, so they had to climb a 19,000-foot wall, get over the mountain to freedom. During this 9-month journey, they were forced to eat their boots and their leather belts for some kind of sustenance. He was one of only less than 30 people that survived this treacherous expedition. This is considered more adventurous, more treacherous, and more dangerous than the famous expedition of Shackleton in the 1914 to 1917. This is, they're looking to make this a movie right now. It's really phenomenal what this guy did. So he got over the mountain. He goes to India. He decides to go study English. He is actually accepted to Oxford. And then he's even accepted into Johnston Trust House in Scotland. And he starts his own meditation center there. And David Bowie is one of his first students. And he brings, a big thing he's known for is bringing the East to the West. He brought this Tibetan Buddhism to the West. And then we had the whole hippie movement kind of built in there too. He became a teacher later in the USA, and he taught Episode 3, William Burroughs and Allen Ginsberg. We talked about them in Episode 3, if you'll remember, with the Naked Lunch. They actually taught at his school in Boulder, Colorado. He opened up a number of schools, I think about 11 throughout the country. And they taught this transcendental Buddhism, this Tibetan Buddhism. And he was actually accused later on of sleeping with students. He was accused of actually forcing one woman to dine with him naked, literally ripping her clothes off with his bare hands. He was accused of spending $40,000 on cocaine a year. And he drove drunk a lot, not to mention he just drank a lot. But the joke was on him, literally, because he crashed into a joke shop in California. Driving drunk, he crashed into a joke shop, and he became half paralyzed. Complications from this and drinking later killed him in 1986, and his body was packed with salt in a wooden box. And when he got cremated on May 26, 1987, people said they saw rainbows, they saw eagles circling the sky, weird lights, a bunch of mystical stuff. You can tell the end of his life wasn't so magical, but he was a man who had accomplished a lot. As far as this book, so he wrote this book, he started these teachings of Shambhala before he left Tibet. And then when he crossed the mountain, he kind of materialized them. And he created this book along with another number of other books, but this one in particular, it changed my life. I mean, literally, it probably saved my life. It opens up the idea of a state that can be achieved, a state of warriorship. When you think warrior, you think killing, you think attack, you think a soldier. Well, that's not the traditional sense in the Tibetan religion. It is more of a fearlessness, conquering fear, not conquering and pushing down fear, but conquering and accepting fear. Understanding that there is a basic goodness to everything around you, and that sadness should be accepted. There's something good about sadness. And none of this stuff is really taught in Western ideologies, but this is taught in this book, Shambhala, and in his teachings. He really preaches about egolessness. Let go of your ego, let go of the I, let go of the me, let go of the mine, and accept the ours, ours, us, we. And whenever I first read this, I was in high school, and it blew my mind to think like this, because all my life I had been taught about where can you get, what can your ambition do, what can you achieve? But now it kind of confused me, because I'm reading this stuff and he's saying it's not about that. Calm down. Ambition is bad. I'm thinking ambition is bad. That's crazy. How you got to achieve things, right? That's not what they teach in Shambhala. This was a fascinating book. It brings dignity, confidence, and wisdom to every facet of life. It's not religious, but it is a way of life. In Shambhala terms, it is possible to live moment by moment for individuals to establish an enlightened society. Ultimately, the goal is let's live together in peace. Let's have Shambhala, that hidden city, become every city. This is, what do I say about this book? Go get it. Pause this video right now. I'll wait for you. Okay, did you go get the book? Read it. Go get it and read it. This is one of those books I say, just drop what you're doing right now and go get it. It's going to change your life. And everyone needs to read this book. If we could all think the same way on this level, a lot of good would be done in this world. So if you want to call in 321-405-2476, that's the book of the week. Yes, it is an obscure book, but it is an excellent book. I mean, the stuff is like Motley Crue in the 80s. I love it! All right, good reads. This week, we're talking about a science fiction read. We're talking about Kim Stanley Robinson, book he published July 7, 2015, Aurora. All right, see this flag? This flag is what we have all said whenever we establish our colonies on Mars and we say, here is Mars. This is the Mars flag. And this isn't just like agreed by some people. Like, this is across the board. Everyone's like, yeah, let's do this flag. This flag came from Kim Stanley's books. He had a Mars trilogy before the book Aurora that we're talking about. And there's 3 stages of colonizing, terraforming Mars. You have red Mars, the first set of books, green Mars, the second set of books, and then blue Mars, when we got the water and shit and everything's going grand. So that's a fun little fact for you. Flag of Mars. But this same author is responsible for Aurora. Now, I first found out about this book through Tom Hanks. He tweeted about it, and I figured Tom Hanks seems like a cool guy. I would like to check this out. He worked with Christopher McKay, and Christopher McKay is a scientist at NASA, so he really studied this book. And it is the story of a generational ship that is launched in 2545. And over 7 generations, these people have to live on this ship so they can get to the next Earth-like planet, which in this book is called Aurora. It's a moon around another planet in the Tau Ceti, I think it's galaxy. But it's really interesting what goes on with life on a multi-generational spaceship. The ship itself is AI functioning, and at times it malfunctions. And then you look at the human aspect of it, which has authoritarian governments ruling this area, saying you can't travel to this part of the ship, and you can't travel to this part of the ship, and you can't do this. And a young girl, the main protagonist, is Freya, with her mother who dies through part of it, and she has to deal with all this, but she's also granted the passage to travel throughout the ship. And the things that she learns on that, and just the way that humans interact are different. Some of the things that she does might be considered taboo in today's society. So they get to this planet that they've been waiting to get to. And the people go out on the planet and they realize that these pyrons, these small little cells, are getting inside their bodies and killing them. People panic, and they can't have these people back on the ship, so they put them in the airlock and they kill them. And there becomes a huge dispute about what to do next. And it turns into a battle, like a full-on civil war on this ship. And the AI, smart ship, who's creating this narrative through all of it, says, listen, I'm going to have to kill one of you guys if you don't make up your decision. The ship forces them to make peace after a struggling debate, of which results in two factions going out in different ways. One faction goes to a nearby Mars-like planet to try to terraform that, and the other one goes back to Earth. Freya is on the one that goes back to Earth. And as she's going back to Earth, they learn about another ship that was sent out a while back, and something bad had happened to that ship, and it didn't make it to its destination. But she gets back. They suffer some famine along the way. They learn about this other ship, and when they get back to Earth, Freya joins a group of people to help terraform Earth back, after global warming, back into a habitable zone. This was just an awesome book. The themes in this book include the complexity of life on a multi-generational spaceship, and interpersonal psychology, artificial intelligence, and human migration. I think this book is more than relevant for right now. Not so much the science fiction aspect, as that's just more interesting, but things to do with migration, getting along, having peace, and how to deal with authoritarian governments. Excellent book. Thank you, Kim Stanley Robertson. If you like science fiction, go get that. Banned book of the week. It's banned. We're talking about the banned book of the week. It is a actual Wimmelbilderbuch. What is that now? A Wimmelbilderbuch? That sounds German. That's because it is. Wimmelbilderbuch, or a Wimmelbook, is a hidden picture book where someone would draw a crowd, and then you'd have to find a certain aspect or a certain thing within that crowd. Well, what's the first book that pops to mind? Maybe I Spy, but I would say Where's Waldo? Also in the UK known as Where's Wally? The first book was published in 1987 in the UK, and it was written by Martin Handford. Now, Martin Handford, he specialized in drawing crowds back in the day. And we have, so there's Where's Waldy. That's the UK version. That's what it's actually called. But for some reason, in the United States, they changed it to Where's Waldo. I tried to figure out why that happened, but I think it was just kind of a selling point. But he actually he really liked drawing albums, or he liked drawing just crowds. And he had this band, The Vapors. I don't know if you've heard of them, but in 1981 they had an album called Magnets, and this was his drawing for this. And people picked up on this, especially the art director, who said, you got to draw just one character in there, like a hidden Easter egg for people. And he came up with the idea of a red and white striped shirt guy who is, like, his backstory is he's a time traveler and a world traveler. That's Wally. Where's Wally? Where's Waldo? Where's Waldo? He has a cast of other characters, which include Wizard Whitebeard, Waldo, Wolf, Ola, which is Waldo backwards, and that's like his evil counterpart that is yellow, and you can see they're yellow and black. And then they even have the dog evil version of that, which I think is just Wolf backwards. But Winda is also this girl he travels with. And then that's supposed to be a picture of Martin right there drawing Waldo. But as the books go on, it becomes progressively harder to find. Like in the first book, on the first page, there were, I think Waldo was about 0.153 square inches. By the second book, it was reduced to 0.124 square inches. And then by the time we get to the third book, it was 0.051 square inches. And in the last 3 to 7 books, the last 5, 6, and 7, there were 7 books in total. It's anywhere from 0.0031 square inches to 0.0026 square inches. I mean, he's really putting it on. And there's even a pocket edition that came out. And the pocket edition, you literally have to use a magnifying glass to find Waldo and his counterparts in there. Even in the first book of the first page, there's 225 characters. Whenever you get to the first page of the last book, there's 850 characters. So this was just something people really enjoyed. They enjoyed it to such a degree that he gained some kind of minor celebrity status. And they put this shit on pillows. They put this shit on... They put it everywhere, notebooks, trappers, school supplies, backpacks, video games, and a television series. That's the television series, of which Ray Romano's brother, the guy who played Ray Romano's brother, Brad Garrett, he voices Wizard Whitebeard. And the guy who composed the music for this was actually the same guy that composed the music, David Schwartz, the music for Arrested Development. This small series was only 13 episodes. It only ran for one series, and Nickelodeon almost won an award for it. It was nominated for the 1992 annual Young Artist Award, of which Martin Hanford almost won it on CBS. In 2005, Nickelodeon was about to create a movie about Where's Waldo, but it didn't really happen because there were leadership changes at Paramount. But in 2007, he sold the rights to Waldo for $2.5 million. I don't know what they're going to do with that, but I would like to see something else happen. Maybe create some new books. But you're asking, all right, Knial, why is this a banned book? 1987, when the first book came out, there was a bare breast. I think we have a picture of that, but they actually changed it in 1997 to give the girl a top. But you can see right there, if you look at the 1987, you can see a side boob. And people noticed this, people got mad. It was banned at schools, it was banned at libraries, and it was a different time. It was just a dot. But that's why it was banned. And then even in Texas prisons, it was banned because it had stickers. I don't know what prisoners do with stickers, but not allowed. So that's Waldo. Trip back to memory lane. Other obscure things. And other obscure things this week, we're talking about the other gospel. Yeah, sure, there are a lot of other gospels. But we're talking about the gospel of Judas. You know, the evil guy, the antagonist of the Passion of Christ, the guy who sold Jesus for money. Well, this book's not necessarily nice to Judas, but it paints a different picture. There is a scene, so in the book of Judas, it talks about Jesus having these secret deals. I mean, that's what this is. It's the backstory about Judas and Jesus that nobody else knew about. The book was originally found by an Egyptian, and he had 31 pages of it. He put it all together, and he went around calling it I think it was called the Codex Chacos, and he kept it safeguarded. He tried to sell it, but he could never sell it because he was asking for $3.5 million for this